The phone rang while Margaret O'Connell was sitting on the cracked vinyl bench of Dr. Patel's waiting room on 86th and Lexington. The receptionist had just called out Mrs. O'Connell when the screen lit up. Lila, mobile. Margaret pressed the green button out of habit, the way she had every Sunday for 43 years. "Mom, we're leaving for the Hamptons tonight. I already sold your brownstone and the Chevy. We needed the cash for the new place. Bye." The line went dead. Margaret stared at the phone. 43 years of Sunday pot roast, college tuition, scraped knees, and midnight fevers, gone in 23 words. Around her, the waiting room smelled of bleach and old magazines. A toddler sneezed into his mother's sleeve. Someone coughed. Margaret's pulse beat in her ears like subway brakes. She was 72, widowed 6 months, and, according to her only child, now homeless. But Margaret O'Connell did not cry. Not yet. Because something cold and metallic had clicked inside her chest. The same click she'd felt the day Thomas died at the breakfast table, mid-sentence, mid-coffee. Thomas had been an accountant. Quiet, precise, the kind of man who alphabetized the spice rack and still kissed her every morning like it was 1968. 3 days before the aneurysm, he'd pressed a thick manila envelope into her hands. "Put this in the top drawer, Maggie. Open it only when you're ready. Promise me." She'd promised. Then she'd buried him, buried the envelope under winter scarves, and buried herself in grief. Now, in the fluorescent hum of the clinic, she remembered. The doctor told her she was healthy for a woman your age and handed her a printout about calcium. She folded it into a tiny square, tucked it in her purse, and took the M86 crosstown bus home to Brooklyn. The brownstone on DeGrasse Street looked smaller than memory, 3 stories, red brick, the stoop where Lila had learned to ride a bike. A for sale sign swung in the wind. A young couple stood on the sidewalk, measuring windows with their eyes. Margaret walked past without stopping. She had a key, she had a drawer, she had a promise. The envelope was heavier than she remembered. Inside, deeds, stock certificates, bank statements, and a letter in Thomas's neat accountant's hand. "My Maggie. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I kept secrets, not from distrust, but from love. You never liked numbers. I never wanted you to worry. The brownstone is the tip. We own 6 more buildings in Brooklyn and Manhattan, plus a portfolio that grew while we slept. You are the sole shareholder of O'Connell Holdings, LLC. Lila must never know until she's ready to value more than money. Protect yourself. Protect her from herself. All my love, forever, Thomas." Margaret read it twice. Then she opened the bank app on her phone, something Thomas had set up years ago and she'd ignored. The balance made her sit down hard on the bed. $14,142,405.62. She laughed once, sharp and startled. The sound echoed off the radiator. Lila and her boyfriend, Chase, 29, gelled hair, a TikTok following of 1.2 million, had already moved into a glass-walled loft in Soho. Margaret knew because the realtor, a nervous kid named Ethan, called the next morning. "Mrs. O'Connell, I wanted to confirm the sale. Your daughter said you were moving to assisted living. She had power of attorney." "I signed nothing," Margaret said. Ethan swallowed audibly. "She showed documents from after your husband passed." Grief makes people stupid, Margaret thought. She'd signed anything put in front of her at the funeral home. "I'll handle it," she said, and hung up. She called Alan Weinberg, Thomas's old law partner, now semi-retired in Scarsdale. Alan, it's Maggie O'Connell. Maggie, how are you holding up? I need a favor. Quietly. She told him everything. Alan whistled low. Thomas always said you were the smart one. Lila can't sell what she doesn't own. The brownstone's in the LLC. So's the Chevy. Title's in your name. We'll void the sale, but it'll take a few weeks. You want me to sue? No, Margaret said. I want her to learn. Alan was quiet. You sure? I've never been sure. For 3 weeks, Margaret played the part. She packed 2 suitcases, left the brownstone keys under the mat for the buyers, and moved into a studio apartment above a bodega on Atlantic Avenue. The radiator clanked. The neighbor played reggaeton at 3 a.m. She bought day-old bagels and told the super her name was Maggie Smith. Lila called once. Mom, I left your share in your account. $82,000. That's generous, right? Chase says the market's hot. You can get a nice 1-bedroom in Queens. Margaret listened to the excitement in her daughter's voice, the same excitement Lila had at 8, begging for a puppy. I understand, honey, she said. Safe travels. She hung up before the tears came. Lila's downfall began in the Hamptons. Chase's brand deals dried up. The loft's rent, $14,000 a month, was due. The brownstone money vanished into crypto wallets and bottle service. By August, they were subletting couches in Williamsburg. Lila waitressed at a rooftop bar in Midtown, black apron, sore feet, tips, and singles. Margaret watched from afar. She took the F train to Manhattan twice a week, sat in the back of Lila's bar with a scarf over her hair, ordered seltzer, left $20 tips. Lila never recognized her. In September, Chase ghosted, left a note, need space, Europe calls, took the last of the brownstone money and Lila's dignity. Lila came home to the studio above the bodega on a rainy Tuesday in October. She had 1 duffel bag, wet hair, and eyes like bruised plums. Mom, she said, and collapsed. Margaret made tea, chamomile, 2 sugars, the way Lila liked it when she had the flu in 3rd grade. I messed up, Lila whispered. Everything. I know, Margaret said. They lived like that for weeks. Lila slept on the pull-out couch. She got a second job, cleaning offices in Fitty at night. Margaret struggled to pay rent with her teacher's pension. She wore the same cardigan until the elbows shone. Lila stopped wearing makeup. She learned the subway map by heart. She cried in the shower so Margaret wouldn't hear. One night, Lila came home with a split lip. Some guy at the bar grabbed me. I told him off. He didn't like it. Margaret's heart cracked, but she said nothing, just handed her daughter an ice pack and a mug of cocoa. Alan called in November. It's done. Brownstone's back in your name. Chevy's in a garage in Red Hook. Lila's power of attorney revoked. The buyers got their deposit back, quietly. And the loft in Soho? Yours. Always was. Lila's been paying rent to your LLC. Margaret closed her eyes. Send the eviction notice. 30 days. You sure? She needs to finish the lesson. 1. The notice arrived on a Wednesday. Lila opened it in the kitchenette, fluorescent light buzzing overhead. Mom, this says I have to vacate by December 15 from my apartment. Margaret looked up from her crossword. That's terrible, honey. It's signed by O'Connell Holdings. Mom, that's... Your father's company, Margaret finished. I know. Lila's face went white. You knew? Margaret folded the newspaper since the day you called me in the doctor's office. Silence stretched like subway tracks. "Why?" Lila's voice broke. "Why let me fall apart?" Margaret stood. At 72, she was still taller than her daughter. "Because you needed to know what it feels like to have nothing, to scrub toilets at 2 a.m., to count quarters for laundry, to be afraid of the dark because you can't pay Con Ed." Lila sank to the floor. "I was awful to you." "Yes. I sold your home." "You tried." "I thought you'd be proud of me, living big," Chase said. "Chase is in Ibiza with a 19-year-old influencer. You're here with me." Lila looked up. "I don't deserve you." "No," Margaret said gently, "but you're stuck with me." Sss. They met Alan the next day in his midtown office. Snow dusted the windows. Lila wore her waitress uniform under her coat. Black pants, white shirt, name tag still pinned, Lila. Alan slid a folder across the mahogany desk. "Deeds, statements, the Chevy's title, all in your mother's name." Lila opened it with shaking hands. Page after page of numbers. The brownstone, a pre-war walk-up in Harlem, a commercial building on 125th, Tesla stock, Apple, a brokerage account with more zeros than Lila had ever seen. 14, Alan said, give or take. Lila looked at Margaret. "You could have bought me out of everything. The loft, the jobs, the shame." "I could have," Margaret said, "but then you'd never have learned." "Learned what?" "That love isn't a safety net. It's a mirror. You see yourself in it, good, bad, broken, and you decide who you want to be." "You already are," Margaret whispered. In January, they moved back to the brownstone. Lila insisted on paying rent, $800 a month, wired from her cleaning paycheck. Margaret deposited it into a scholarship fund for single mothers. The Chevy came back polished, cherry red, smelling of Thomas's aftershave. Lila drove it to Red Hook every Sunday to pick up Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly neighbor who'd lost her license. They did groceries together. Lila carried the bags. Spring came early, cherry blossoms on the Brooklyn Promenade. Lila's first client at the women's shelter was a waitress named Sophia, grabbed by a customer, just like Lila once was. Lila listened, bought her coffee, helped her file a restraining order. One night, Lila came home with paint under her nails. "I started a mural in the shelter basement," she said. "Kids helped. It's the skyline, but every building has a window open, so no one feels trapped." Margaret traced the paint with her finger. "Your father would have loved this." Lila hesitated. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you think he knew that I'd mess up this bad?" Margaret thought of Thomas's letter, "Protect her from herself." "He knew you'd find your way back," she said. "He just wanted you to walk the long way so you'd remember the path." Summer brought a heat wave. The brownstone's AC wheezed. Lila and Margaret sat on the stoop with popsicles, watching kids chalk the sidewalk. "Chase messaged me," Lila said suddenly. Margaret raised an eyebrow. "From Mykonos. Wants forgiveness. Says he's grown." "And?" "I blocked him." Lila licked cherry syrup from her wrist. "Some bridges you burn so you can build better ones." Margaret smiled. Wise words. "Mrs. Rodriguez taught me. She also taught me how to make pasteles. We're catering the shelter's Juneteenth party." In August, Lila graduated with honors. The ceremony was in a gym that smelled of floor wax and ambition. Margaret wore the same navy dress she'd worn to Thomas's retirement party. Lila wore a cap and gown over her cleaning uniform.
Afterward, they walked to the Chevy. Lila tossed Margaret the keys.
Your turn to drive. Where to? Red Hook. Mrs. Rodriguez made flan. They drove with the windows down, Billie Holiday on the radio. At a red light, Lila reached over and squeezed Margaret's hand. I used to think home was a place you could sell, she said. Turns out it's a person who waits for you to come back, even when you don't deserve it. Margaret squeezed back. And sometimes home is the lesson that teaches you how to stay. Years later, when the brownstone stoop was worn smooth by shelter kids and Lila's own daughter learned to ride a bike there, Margaret would still find a manila envelope in the drawer. She never opened it again. She didn't need to. The fortune was no longer hidden. Neither was the love.